The vast expanse of space had always been under the control of the Galactic Empire. For centuries, they ruled without challenge, their fleets dominating the stars. Their warships, colossal in size, struck fear into anyone who dared to cross their path. The Empire's soldiers were trained to fight and conquer, and their weapons could destroy entire planets. No one could match their might. No one had ever dared to. But today was different. A small, unremarkable signal appeared on the Empire's radar screens. At first, no one paid much attention to it. It was nothing more than a blip, a mere glitch. However, as the signal grew stronger, the Empire's sensors detected something strange. It was not like anything they had ever seen. It was a ship, an enormous one, heading straight for the Empire's borders. The Empire had no idea what to expect. Their leaders gathered in a command room, watching the radar display flicker. What could it be? A rogue ship? A new enemy? The questions swirled and a sense of unease began to spread. "Scan it again," the Emperor's voice commanded, his tone cold and calculating. The Chief of Security, a seasoned officer, quickly ordered the scanners to work. The results were baffling. The ship was not only massive, but its design was completely alien. It had no markings, no symbols, nothing that would indicate its origin. The shape was odd, almost organic, with sleek curves and edges that didn't match anything in the Empire's database. It was like nothing the Empire had ever seen before. "What is this?" the officer muttered to himself, his fingers trembling as he worked the controls. "It's not one of ours." The ship continued its steady course, and the Empire's military leaders began to feel the weight of uncertainty. The unknown ship was approaching fast, and they had no idea how to respond. The Empire was used to having the upper hand, but this was different. This was an enemy they couldn't identify, one that was moving closer by the second. "Should we intercept?" one of the generals asked. His voice was shaky, a rare crack in his usually confident demeanor. "What if it's a trap?" The Emperor stood silently, his mind racing. He had seen many threats in his time, but nothing like this. The Empire had never been this vulnerable. He knew that if they did nothing, they risked letting this unknown force slip past their defenses. But if they acted, they might be walking into a disaster. The fear in the room was palpable. "Prepare the fleet," the Emperor finally ordered. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the concern he was trying to hide. "We will meet this thing head on." The warships were mobilized, their engines humming to life as they powered up. The Imperial fleet assembled in space, its formation a symbol of their unshakable dominance. There were dozens of ships, each one armed to the teeth with weapons capable of obliterating entire planets. The Empire had never needed to worry about any force that could stand against them. But this unknown vessel, this strange, silent ship, was different. As the human warship drew closer, the tension in the Empire's fleet grew unbearable. The unknown ship was getting larger on their screens, and still, no one could make sense of it. It didn't communicate. It didn't show any signs of aggression. Yet the Empire knew something was wrong. The silence was worse than any battle cry. It was the kind of silence that made hearts race and minds swirl with uncertainty. Then, just as the first of the Empire's ships moved into position to engage, the unknown ship suddenly changed its course. It wasn't retreating. It was advancing, moving closer and closer to the Empire's defenses. The sheer audacity of the move stunned everyone. The humans aboard that ship weren't running. They were coming right for them. "Open fire," the general commanded, his voice trembling with both fear and anger. The fleet's weapons were primed, and within moments, lasers and missiles streaked toward the mysterious warship. The Empire's guns fired with deadly precision, their powerful weapons intended to cripple any enemy that dared to approach. But something unexpected happened. The ship didn't even flinch. The projectiles hit the warship, but it didn't explode. It didn't even appear to be damaged. The unknown vessel simply absorbed the attack, its shields glowing faintly as if to mock the Empire's firepower. The Empire's officers watched in disbelief as their weapons had no effect. This was no ordinary ship. It was something far beyond anything they had ever encountered. The command room fell silent. The fleet's leader, the general, stared at the screen, his mouth open in shock. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "We've never seen technology like this." The Emperor's face darkened. This was no ordinary enemy. This was something new, something terrifying. He had no idea what it meant, but one thing was clear. The Empire's reign was being challenged, and for the first time in centuries, they were not the strongest force in the galaxy. The unknown ship continued its approach, its lights flickering ominously in the dark void of space. The Empire had never felt so vulnerable, and a chilling thought crossed the Emperor's mind. Could this ship be the beginning of something far worse? Something that could destroy them all? As the unknown warship neared the Empire's fleet, the tension reached its breaking point. This was no ordinary arrival. It was a signal, a warning, and the start of a nightmare the Empire had never dreamed possible. The strange ship drew closer, its form looming against the vast emptiness of space. The once calm atmosphere within, the Empire's command center had shifted, replaced by an undercurrent of panic. No one spoke, but everyone felt it. The weight of uncertainty, the fear of the unknown. This was not just an encounter. This was something far bigger, far more terrifying than they could have imagined. The fleet, now fully assembled and ready for battle, hovered in the silence of space, waiting for orders. Every officer aboard the Empire's ships, each trained to face the most dangerous of enemies, now found themselves frozen, uncertain. They had faced countless threats before, but none of them had ever felt like this. This wasn't just an enemy. This was an enigma. The ship's appearance was enough to unsettle even the most hardened soldiers. Its sleek, otherworldly design seemed to defy logic, like something out of a nightmare. No ship they had ever encountered moved like this one, with such eerie precision and purpose. "Why isn't it responding?" one of the officers asked, his voice trembling despite himself. "We've tried everything," another officer replied. "It's not communicating, not showing any signs of aggression. It's just coming." The fleet's commanders exchanged uneasy glances. This was unlike anything they had been trained for. There was no protocol for dealing with a ship that didn't fire first, that didn't make its intentions clear. The Empire's greatest strength was its power to strike without hesitation, to crush any force that stood in its way. But now, this strange vessel was making them question everything they knew. The Emperor stood by the massive viewing window in the command room, staring out into the void, his hands clasped behind his back. His face was unreadable, yet his mind raced. What was this ship? Where had it come from? And why was it heading straight for them without fear? His officers, who had always followed his lead without question, now found themselves second-guessing every decision. The longer the ship lingered on the horizon, the more its presence seemed to cast a shadow over their once unshakable confidence. Without warning, a voice crackled through the ship's intercom. The sound was low, almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken questions. "Commander, the unknown ship. It's shifting course," an officer called out, his voice full of urgency. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean? It's not retreating, is it?" "No, Your Excellency, it's coming closer, and the strange part is it's not moving like we expected. It's not following any standard flight patterns, it's gliding." The word gliding hit the room like a shockwave. In space, there were no gliding ships. There were ships that fought, that attacked, that defended, but nothing glided. Nothing moved so gracefully, so confidently, as if it were beyond the need to flee or to fight. This was a ship that didn't fear them, and that realization cut deeper than any weapon could. The Emperor paced the room, his thoughts swirling. "Prepare to engage," he ordered, though his voice held a hint of hesitation that no one dared acknowledge. As the fleet closed in on the mysterious ship, the tension in the command center escalated. Everyone could feel the unease in the air, thickening with every passing second. The silence of space seemed to stretch, holding its breath. What were they up against? The ship didn't respond to their initial warning shots. It didn't retreat and it didn't fire back. It simply absorbed their attacks, as though they were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. The Empire's fleet continued to fire, but the ship barely seemed to notice. "This is impossible," one of the generals said, his face pale with disbelief. "Nothing can withstand this kind of firepower." The Emperor's mind raced, desperately searching for an explanation. How could they fight something that didn't react, didn't fight back? They were used to enemies that struck when provoked, that fought to defend themselves. But this was something else entirely. The ship wasn't attacking. It wasn't even engaging. It was simply existing, moving forward, undeterred. And that was when it hit them. They weren't the ones in control here. The Empire's military might was nothing against the sheer presence of this unknown force. The human ship wasn't acting out of fear or desperation. It was acting with purpose, with confidence. "Open all channels," the Emperor said, his voice suddenly firm. "We need to understand this." But the response they received was chilling. A transmission came through, not from the ship itself, but from somewhere deep within its hull. It was human speech, slow and deliberate, yet there was an edge to it that sent a cold shiver through everyone in the room. "We come to show you what true power looks like," the voice said, calm, yet filled with a terrifying certainty. "Prepare yourselves. This is the beginning." The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving the room in stunned silence. No one moved. No one spoke. The impact of those words lingered, settling over the Empire's officers like a dark cloud. The Emperor's face hardened. He had always been the one who commanded fear, the one who struck terror into the hearts of others. But now, for the first time, he felt something else, something unfamiliar. Fear. The unknown ship continued its approach, and with each passing second, the reality of the situation became clearer. This was not a battle they could win. They had underestimated their enemy, and now they would pay the price. And still the ship came, gliding forward, like a shadow stretching across the stars. The unknown ship drifted closer, and the Empire's command center grew even more tense. The fleet, once confident and brimming with strength, now felt like a group of ants facing a predator they couldn't see or understand. Every officer on board the Empire's ships was on edge, their eyes fixed on the approaching vessel. What were they dealing with? What was this strange enemy? The Emperor stood in the center of the room, his hands clenched at his sides. His usual calm demeanor had been replaced by a cold fury. He had never imagined that his vast empire could be so vulnerable, yet here he was, facing something that seemed impervious to everything they had thrown at it. "Why aren't our weapons working?" a senior officer asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and panic. "Shields," another officer replied. "Their shields are beyond anything we have in our database. They absorb our attacks without even flinching." The Emperor's mind raced. There had to be a weakness. There had to be a way to stop this ship. But so far every move they made was useless. It was like trying to break through an invisible barrier. No matter how many times the Empire's fleet launched their attacks, the ship didn't react. It didn't return fire, nor did it move in a defensive manner. It simply kept coming. Suddenly, a new voice broke through the silence of the command room. "Sir, the enemy ship, it's changing its formation." Everyone turned to the viewing screen, and what they saw caused a collective gasp. The ship, which had been gliding peacefully, began to shift its position. It wasn't just moving, it was rearranging itself as though it was adapting to the situation. The sleek, smooth shape of the ship now had new, sharp angles. It was as if it was transforming before their eyes, ready to meet whatever challenge the Empire could throw at it. The commanders felt a wave of unease flood the room. This was no ordinary vessel. "What is it doing?" the Emperor asked, his voice steady but with a hint of tension creeping in. "We're not sure, Your Excellency. It's like it's preparing for something," replied the officer at the scanner. For the first time, the Empire's military officers began to feel a genuine fear. They had always been the ones to dictate the terms of battle, but this was different. This enemy wasn't playing by any of the rules they knew. On the battlefield, the human warship continued its steady approach. There was no panic in its movement, no rush to attack. It didn't need to. The Empire's weapons had proven ineffective, and the ship knew it. The crew aboard the warship had one clear mission: show the Empire that their reign was coming to an end. They had no intention of taking any prisoners. They were there to make a statement. Back in the command center, the Emperor's officers exchanged uneasy glances. Despite everything, the ship was still drawing nearer, and they couldn't stop it. The last of the Empire's ships moved into position, ready to make another attempt to destroy the unknown vessel. "Fire at will," the general ordered, his voice cracking under the weight of his own fear. The fleet unleashed a full barrage, their weapons lighting up the darkness of space. The Empire's cannons fired with all their might, their blasts aimed directly at the heart of the enemy ship. This time, they thought, they would make it stop. But once again, the unknown ship did not respond the way they had hoped. The attack landed with full force. A massive explosion of light filled the screen, blinding everyone for a moment. When the light faded, the unknown ship was still there. It hadn't been damaged. It hadn't even moved. The silence in the command center was deafening. Everyone was staring, wide-eyed, unable to comprehend what they had just seen. Their most powerful weapons, their most advanced technology had failed. "What is going on?" the general asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How is it possible?" The Emperor stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the screen. He couldn't let the fear show. He was the Emperor, and he had always been the one who controlled everything. But now, for the first time in his reign, he was facing an enemy that he could not control, an enemy whose power was beyond his understanding. His officers were waiting for him to give an order, but the Emperor was lost in thought. He had never been in a situation like this. The ship wasn't just another rebel fleet. It wasn't some insignificant force that could be wiped out with a few blasts. This ship was something entirely different. It was a symbol of power, of fear, and it was drawing nearer with every passing moment. Finally, the Emperor spoke, his voice calm but heavy with the weight of his realization. "Focus everything we have on it. Every weapon, every resource, everything, now." The fleet responded immediately, but even as they prepared for another assault, doubt lingered in the air. Everyone could feel it. This was no longer a fight for survival. It was a fight for dominance. And the question that haunted every officer's mind was, could they even win? The unknown ship continued its steady approach, indifferent to the Empire's attempts to stop it. As it drew closer to the Empire's fleet, the crew of the warship knew that their moment had come. The final confrontation was imminent. They weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting to show the galaxy that humanity had arrived, and no one would ever dare challenge them again. But the Empire was not ready to give up. The battle was far from over, and the final outcome was still uncertain. But one thing was clear. The fate of the Empire was hanging by a thread, and the unknown ship was the force that would determine whether they would continue to reign or fall into oblivion. As the final moments of suspense filled the air, both sides braced for what was to come next. The command center of the Galactic Empire had never been so silent. Officers who once spoke with confidence now whispered with caution. Every screen showed the same thing. The unknown human warship moving slowly through space, undamaged, unstoppable, and unreadable. The Empire had thrown everything it had, yet nothing seemed to work. It was like firing pebbles at a mountain as the mysterious vessel drew closer. A quiet question echoed through the control deck. "Why hasn't it attacked us yet?" The Emperor didn't answer. Instead, he stared at the screen, deep in thought. Something was strange about this ship. It hadn't fired a single shot. It had only defended itself. Was it a warning? A message? Or something worse? Something. Observing them, studying them. "Sir," one of the analysts said carefully, "we're picking up a signal, coming from the ship." "A signal?" the Emperor repeated. "Put it on speaker." The room held its breath as static filled the speakers. Then a voice came through, calm, firm, and entirely human. To the rulers of the Empire, the voice said, "This is your final message. You are not alone in this galaxy anymore. We have seen what your empire does. We have watched, and we have prepared. What you face now is not your end, it is your lesson." Silence followed. The officers looked at each other. What did that mean? A lesson? The Empire had spent centuries growing stronger, taking control of star systems, silencing resistance. Who could possibly teach them anything now? The Emperor's voice broke the silence. "Where is that message coming from?" "From the center of the ship," the officer replied. "But it's encrypted with a type of code we've never seen before. Our systems can't trace it fully, it's far more advanced than ours." The Emperor turned to his top science officer. "What else do we know about this ship?" The officer replied, "We've been analyzing its design. It doesn't match anything in our known records. The materials used, we don't even know how they're made. The energy signature is extremely stable. It runs on a power source we can't identify." "In simple words?" the Emperor asked. "In simple words," the officer said, "it's more advanced than anything we've ever built." That was the moment reality began to sink in. The Empire wasn't facing an enemy it could outgun or outthink. It was facing something beyond its imagination, and that something had chosen to make itself known now, after centuries of silence. But then something else happened. The mysterious ship changed direction. It began to move, not toward the capital, but toward the Empire's outer defense stations, the ones meant to detect any invasion early. "Why is it going there?" someone asked. "To show us," the Emperor whispered. "To show us how easily they could have come in without us even noticing." As the ship neared the defense stations, every sensor and camera locked onto it. The Empire's engineers watched in disbelief. The ship passed through layers of detection grids, anti-intruder systems, and sensor fields, and none of them responded. It was as if the ship was invisible to all their equipment. "How is that possible?" an officer asked, stunned. "They've already studied us," the science officer said quietly. "They knew exactly how to avoid every system we rely on." The Emperor looked around the room. His most powerful minds were speechless. Every strategy, every tool of control, every layer of protection, useless. Then, without warning, all screens turned black. For a moment it seemed like a system failure. But soon a symbol appeared on every screen. A glowing mark shaped like a star wrapped in a spiral. "What is that?" the Emperor asked. It's not from our database," the analyst said. "It's something completely new." And then the screens lit up again. But this time, they were not showing the Empire's own data. They were showing the Empire's own history, but not the version they taught in schools, the true one. The hidden files, the secret actions, the dark past. They were seeing themselves, through the eyes of outsiders, every order that silenced a planet. Every colony taken, every lie told in the name of power. "They know everything," the general said quietly. "They've been watching us the whole time." No one spoke, because there was nothing to say. The ship didn't need to fight to win. It had already shown the Empire what it truly was, and that was the real fear. Now all that was left was one final question. What would the ship do next? And the galaxy waited for the answer. A strange silence settled over the Galactic Empire. For the first time in history, their entire military command had paused, not because they were out of weapons, but because they were out of answers. The human warship, still untouched and unreadable, floated in space like a calm storm waiting to be understood. It hadn't fired a single shot, yet it had shaken the Empire from its core. Deep inside the central command, the Emperor sat alone in his private chamber, watching the symbol on the screen, the star wrapped in a spiral. A quiet symbol, yet it had become more powerful than any fleet he had ever built. Around him, the best minds of the Empire still tried to decode its meaning, its message, its origin. But none could. Then, the unexpected happened. Across dozens of Imperial colonies, screens turned on by themselves. Civilians, workers, soldiers, all saw the same thing, a live feed from inside the human warship. But what they saw wasn't a threat or a display of weapons. It was something much more surprising. A peaceful room filled with quiet hums, glowing walls, and people. Humans. They looked calm, focused. They weren't monsters or shadows. They were real, and they were watching back. Then a voice came, soft but steady. We did not come to destroy. We came to reveal. Your leaders have hidden much from you, but the time of secrets is ending. Every colony, every station, every vessel in the Empire was now connected to this broadcast. Information began flowing in, not in the form of attacks, but in the form of knowledge. Detailed logs of hidden history, maps of stolen worlds, files once thought erased. The warship had somehow collected it all, and now it was giving it to the people. Back on the capital planet, panic began to spread among the Imperial elite. "Cut the signal," one officer shouted. "We can't," replied the technician. "It's not coming through any of our systems. They're using a separate network, something we've never seen." Inside homes and on the streets, citizens watched with wide eyes. Many of them had believed the Empire brought order and peace to the galaxy. Now they were seeing what that peace had truly cost. Whole civilizations wiped from records, ancient cities buried under false reports. And through it all, the same name kept appearing: Earth. The humans hadn't forgotten what the Empire did to their early colony ships long ago. While most of the galaxy had no idea those encounters even happened, Earth remembered. And now, after growing stronger in silence, they were back, but not to take revenge. Not yet. They were showing the galaxy the truth, and truth could be more powerful than any weapon. As this information spread, the people of the Empire began to ask questions. Murmurs turned into voices. Voices turned into conversations. Why were we never told this? Is this real? What else have they hidden from us? The Emperor watched it all unfold. He had always believed fear was enough to keep control. But this wasn't fear. This was awakening, and that was far more dangerous. Suddenly another message appeared only on the screens inside the Empire's command center. To those who rule, you still have a choice. We do not wish for war, but we will not allow your silence to continue. If you are ready to speak, we will listen. No timeline. No countdown. Just a quiet demand for change. The Emperor stood slowly. His empire, built over generations, was beginning to shake. Not from an attack, but from the truth. And out there, the warship waited, still unmoving, still silent. But its presence was louder than anything the Empire had ever faced. A storm without thunder. And everyone in the galaxy knew. Something much bigger was coming next. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The human warship had not moved for days, but its message still echoed across space. It had not attacked, not even once. Yet everything had changed. The people of the Galactic Empire, once loyal and unquestioning, now looked at their leaders with doubt in their eyes. They had seen the truth, and truth once revealed could not be erased. Inside the highest halls of power, the Emperor sat in silence. Around him, his advisors argued. Some wanted to respond with strength, others begged for diplomacy, but none of their ideas could hide one clear fact. The Empire was no longer in control. Outside, in the heart of space, the warship waited, and then something happened. The warship opened a communication line again, but this time it wasn't a message or a warning. It was an invitation. A simple signal was sent to the Empire's capital. Send one. No soldiers, no weapons. One voice. One truth. The command center fell into confusion. Is it a trap? One officer asked. But the Emperor already knew the answer. No, he said softly. It's a test. After hours of silence, a decision was made. A diplomat, not a high official, but a respected historian, was chosen. Someone who had studied the Empire's past, someone who knew its mistakes, someone who could speak honestly. As the small shuttle left the planet and slowly approached the human warship, all eyes turned to the skies. Billions watched the live broadcast, not knowing what would happen next. The shuttle docked. A soft blue light guided the visitor inside. The halls of the warship were unlike anything he had ever seen. Smooth, bright, alive. But they weren't. Empty. The humans were waiting. They welcomed him with calm faces. No threats, no fear, just silence, and then a question. Do your people understand now? The historian took a breath. They're beginning to. We didn't come to take, the lead human said. We came to offer, but your empire must choose what kind of future it wants. A large screen lit up behind them, showing a map of the galaxy. One side was marked by borders and control zones, the Empire's way. The other side was open, linked by communication paths, knowledge exchanges, and free alliances. Earth's way. We know what you have done, the human continued. But we also know what you can become. The diplomat listened carefully. He expected demands. He heard none. You're not here to rule? He asked. No, the human replied. We came to shine light on the shadows. What your empire does next, that is your choice. Back on the capital planet, the people were watching. They heard every word, and they started to understand. This ship was not a threat in the way they once feared. It was a mirror, held up to show them who they had become and who they still could be. The warship had every chance to strike, to crush the Tao, empire with unknown power, but it didn't. Because true power wasn't about control. It was about offering a path and waiting to see who would walk it. As the diplomat returned to the empire, he carried not just messages, but ideas. A different kind of future. One built not on fear, but on understanding. The human ship began to turn, slowly moving away. But before it left, one last signal was sent. We are not your enemy, but we will never be your silence. Then, without sound or fire, the ship vanished into the stars, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed. The empire would never be the same, and somewhere deep in space Earth watched and waited.